Knowledge, jnana. So, before starting the topic, I'll go to the next page where it uh, talks about what jnana means in the spiritual context or in the context of how Master explains it. Jnana, the word in the ordinary sense, means knowledge, which may be of different kinds: physical, mental, material, or spiritual. In the spiritual sense, the term is applied so vaguely that often it becomes very difficult to understand its true significance. The range it covers extends from the baser level of common understanding to higher level of inner enlightenment. This gives rise to a lot of confusion and misunderstanding. A man who has learnt a few scriptures, another who can argue and assert things on the basis of his book knowledge, still another who recites every moment sets phrases like Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahma, etc., claims to be a Jnani or the enlightened and is accepted as such by the masses, irrespective of his real inner state. Jnana, in the real sense, refers to the inner condition of the mind, which an Abhyasi develops during the course of his pursuit, while passing through different spiritual states at different knots or granthis. Jnana is in fact the realization of the conditions prevailing at each knot. Now, since the knots are innumerable, the knowledge gained is also different according to the level of approach of the Abhyasi. Thus, it is almost meaningless to call one Jnani without defining his level of approach or the limit of knowledge realized by him. This is the main point which is meant to be elucidated to the readers through the contents of this little book. So, that is basically what it means by uh, Jnana. Now, I'll start the topic. When the time of creation came, preparations commenced, currents flowed out, vibrations intensified, formation of knots or granthis started, momentum gathered, churning process set in, and actions and reactions began and continued till objects began to assume individual forms. The process of creation thus came into full swing. Animate and inanimate objects began to come into existence. In course of time, all the objects came to light and the universe was formed. The activity which had started went on developing till finally the idea of inactivity, which lay at the bottom of motion, began to surge up. It formed the basis of all philosophical speculations. Mental aspirations leading to the search for the higher started from this point and became the foundation of religion. The activity which had already sprung up in us reminded us of its non existent state. When we thought of it, we hit upon the previous state of inactivity. In this way, activity reminded us of inactivity, and the inactivity explained to us the meaning of activity. Thus, the two opposites came to our view. When the first stage of activity came to view, it seemed to be quite akin to the state of motionlessness. But now, having been acquainted with momentum and undergone its pleasing effect to a great extent, the thought of search for peace began to creep up in our mind by itself. When we started the search, our attention was transfixed upon calmness, which we understood to be somewhat more pleasant. But so far we knew not what it actually was, nor had we any taste of it. Experience promoted our understanding, and we began to feel that it is undoubtedly something worth achieving, though we had not experienced it as yet. This is what may be presumed as the preliminary level of jnana or knowledge, which we just read below. People may, however, call this understanding as true knowledge, but actually it amounts only to recognition that there is a state known as peace or tranquility. This is generally the level of a common man, where he gets enlisted as jnani, agnostic, merely for the reason of knowing so much. Yes, sir. So I repeat, this is generally the level of a common man, where he gets enlisted as jnani, agnostic, merely for the reason of knowing so much. That is the only significance of jnana knowledge in the eyes of a common man. How this came about is not difficult to understand. The connecting link between the animate and the inanimate is its root. A poison and its antidote are mostly found adjacent to each other. When we are in the state of inanimation, it is but natural to think of animation because it is at the base of the inanimate and both states are interrelated. Now, the first thought that flashed across the mind was to proceed towards animation, which constituted our very first step towards growth. It is a matter of fact that our vision fails to apprehend a thing situated at a very high or very low level. But since man occupies the middle position, the medium state or samavastha came to his lot. What can that middle point in us be? It is only the heart, and it is at this point that the connecting link between the animate and the inanimate is most clearly felt. This is the reason why meditation on heart is very useful. Now, either we ourselves thought of it or the environments pushed us that way. Anyhow, we learned, anyhow, we leaned towards animate consciousness. But so long as the senses, but so long as the sense of consciousness lingers, the idea of worldliness exists, and this is the pseudo seers have called as jnana or knowledge. I'll take a pause here. Okay, I'll move on. So that was a short article on what jnana means. I'll come to the next topic, which is Granthis knots. And the first knot, this is the saying from today's diary. The real state of enlightenment comes when we get into full consciousness of the condition of enlivenment and after imbibing its effect, secure of emerging in it. When we develop this state and merge into its consciousness, we come to know all about it and thus become jnani, that is enlightened up to that extent. The blissful state brought about by it tempts our heart to go ahead, and our touch with it offers inducement to enter into the next stage. Our courage intimates to us the happy tidings of our onward march towards the real life, which follows every layavastha. That is the state of merging. Layavastha, I'll just read this. Layavastha, state of merging. Merging really refers to a state of settledness in the condition at a certain point or not arrived at by the abhyasi. When after sufficient practice, an abhyasi is able to secure his entry into a certain knot or granthi, he goes round in it for some time, touring the place in order to acquire a thorough experience of it. By this process, he begins to absorb in him the state prevailing at the place. When he becomes saturated with it, his merging has then come into effect. This is known as layavastha, that is merging. But the consciousness of the condition we have by now arrived at also exists. And so long as it does, the state of merging cannot be said to have matured to fullness. For this, we have to proceed on further to acquire the state of settledness, which is termed as identicality or sarupyata. This again is not to the final phase, till it has developed into a still finer state of sayujyata, where the impressions of the state of merging and identicality also become extinct. So that's the explanation on layavastha, which is the state of merging. I'll come back to. We get into, we get in, we get into it. It helps us further, and we begin to advance towards the next point. The feeling of restlessness is no doubt there, but if our will is strong and our efforts sincere, the next condition, which is superior to the previous one, shall dawn without doubt. Though in fact we have to go nowhere, everything being close at hand, yet we have to arrive at the final state definitely. If we get a good guide who pulls out the inner poison, then the nectar alone remains. By self effort, people sometimes do proceed up to some distant limit as well, but definitely they take a very long time. And the danger of being caught within the whirls persists throughout. In the same way, there are numerous subpoints, and at each one of them, the states of merging and identicality repeat themselves. I'll take a pause here. Okay, I'll proceed. Now, I may throw some light on the state of consciousness which blooms after this first subpoint. When we cross this point to breathe in the next, everything seems to be changed. When we get merged into it, a godly state begins to reign within. And when identicality is developed, we begin to feel that a peculiar state reflecting a tinge of divine touch prevails over all objects, animate and inanimate. There is such an indescribable outburst of emotional feelings at this point, as often drives people who lack the support of a worthy guru of caliber to a state of mad ecstasy called avdhuta. We'll read what is avdhuta. Avdhuta ecstatic. It refers to a person who is afflicted by a peculiar type of insanity. Under such a condition, his talks are mostly irrelevant, his actions meaningless and strange, and his general behavior is self-willed. Apparently, he seems to be like spellbound by his own thoughts, which tend mostly towards one particular direction. Such a condition sometimes comes upon an abhyasi when he passes through a particular state prevailing at a knot or granthi. It is more frequent in case of tantric or occult pursuits. In spiritual pursuits too, such a condition sometimes arises when an abhyasi comes across some charmingly attractive condition at a point. But that happens only when the master lacks proper understanding of the situation or is otherwise incapable of apprehending its course by his own power and caliber. In this state, an Abhyasi does not feel like going ahead, and having been overcome by its charming effect, settles down permanently in it, with the result that this onward progress gets arrested forever. It is in fact one of the foremost duties of a worthy master to remain vigilant of the situation and save the Abhyasi from drifting into it. In our system, this dangerous condition is avoided, and the Abhyasi is made to bypass such points with the help of the master's extraordinary power without even having an awareness of it. So, that is what the meaning of Dhuta is. To a state of mad ecstasy of Dhuta, which keeps him entangled in it forever, putting a permanent full stop to his onward advancement. Now, let us ask those who boastfully profess to be the enlightened ones or Gyani, whether they have ever come across such a state, which in fact is but the beginning of the first chapter of the book of knowledge. If we try to attain this state by applying our force of thought, it will only be artificial and not true and genuine. Now we arrive at the next subknot. The consciousness of the condition prevailing at it is in the second stage of knowledge, when by dint of our love and devotion we secure our approach up to it, we find that the condition now becomes lighter and finer than the previous one. What is it that we find at this second knot? It is a state that presents to our view the presence of the godly state prevailing all round and pervading everywhere. It reflects a tinge of plainness and simplicity, which shows that we have gone into it further. At every point, the process of merging and identicality repeats itself, the latter being the final stage of knowledge or jnana. When we have gone through it sufficiently and have experienced everything fully, the next knot then comes into our view. I'll take a pause here. I'll proceed forward to the second knot. Second knot, our intensity of devotion now forces our way into it. It must be borne in mind that on entering into every successive knot, there is a slight feeling of heaviness in the mind, on account of which people often discontinue the practice. But if we take into consideration that every attack of illness is followed by the restoration of good health, we will be encouraged better to attempt crossing of the knots. Now the tone of spiritual experiences is further changed. We feel considerably relieved of the previous denser effect. A clearer view of reality now begins to dawn. Lightness develops to the extent of simplicity all through, though perfect purity is yet far off. This condition comes in about the end of the second knot. Here we feel glimpses of soul, and our experiences at the point are of similar nature. For this reason, it is known as the seat of Atman. Cleanliness and simplicity are the characteristic feature of this state. A feeling of moderation is also experienced to a certain level. There are innumerable subpoints, the detailed description of which is not of much consequence, and the difference is beyond words to explain. In short, now the blissful conditions of the sphere of soul are being unveiled unto us. We get acquainted with characteristic features of the region, and by continued meditation, we secure our merging into it. The first covering is now removed, and we begin to sense the fragrance of the soul, and similar visions appear within and without. Unless we have attained full realization of this state, we cannot claim to have acquired knowledge at all. If we try to develop it by the force of concentration, it will only be sham. The extraordinary mental visions will no doubt come to view, but since they have resulted from the exercise of thought power, they will only serve as a bondage to keep us ensnared so tightly that it shall almost be impossible to extricate ourselves from it. A true aspirant is he who adopts the right course and the right procedure from the beginning to the end. I'll continue. This second knot covers the entire sphere of the soul. It comprises innumerable subpoints appearing in the form of layers, settled round one after the other, and which we have all to get over in order to emerge out of the region. Anyhow, we now exert ourselves to get out and arrive at the next stage by the help of the divine grace. Now, our entry into the next sphere of divine enlightenment justifies our claim to have become Jnani or knower up to that extent. So, that was basically the second knot. Third knot, existence comprises of all the various forms and conditions in which the different elements appear to us. Now, the next stage comes in when the divine luminosity appears in the form of bursting flames of fire. A true devotee associates the heat thereof with that of true love. I may also add that at the time of the creation, the origin wherefrom the currents began to flow out was cold because it was unalloyed with matter. As they flowed out, they gave out jerks, which went on multiplying. The jerks occurred mostly at the point where from the process of creation had started. It will be more comprehensible if, for the sake of understanding, we divide it into three parts. When the coolness got extended up to the limit where it started generating heat, mostly by its own actions, therefrom it began to assume the differentiated form. It was of it was of course the central part. Now the same central part came to our lot in the form of a granthi or knot. There we find some circles circling rings in it. To be more plain, I may frankly say that the very root element, now by itself turned into a knot, and owing to the multiplicity of actions and counteractions, assumed such denseness as to transform it into matter. Now we are absorbed in it through our thought and are wandering around in it so that we may not be able to proceed onwards. When our intense craving brings us in direct contact with the real condition at the knot, we find it to be related with the element of fire. By securing merging in it, by securing merging in it, one acquires command over the element of fire. When we cross this subpoint, we come to the consciousness of its original state, which serves as a ladder for our further approach towards fuller apprehension. Merging has developed in us the knowledge of the condition of the place. It is now ours, and we have acquired mastery over it and have become jnani up to that level. This is what jnana really means, and such is the actual condition of the jnani, the knower of the divine knowledge. The real knowledge of a state means complete identicality with the state we have merged in. It brings us to full consciousness of the condition, and for this very reason, it is interpreted as the real life, which can be experienced only by an animate being. Being thus encouraged, we now begin to aspire impatiently for further knowledge. Fourth knot, we proceed on and come to the next higher region. The state of fire now disappears. This shows that we have now entered the state which is quite opposite in character to the previous one, and it is that of water. If we settle down at this merging, then in spite of all our wanderings in it, we can but master this element alone. The help that knowledge offers us is that it infuses us with a longing for the search of the ultimate. If this longing is absent, or one does not crave for reality in true sense, he stops at the point and begins displaying miracles. We can truly realize the condition of the region only when our craving for reality helps us to develop in us the state of identicality which follows every merging. Since we aim at the absolute reality, we, in spite of our mastery over the knot, never feel inclined to utilize this power. There is such a soothing tranquility at this point as one would feel by the refreshing effect of a vast stretch of water before his view. Identicality with that state, with that condition, will bring the Abhyasi to fuller realization of the state. Yet, there remains one thing to be brought to light. It is that at every knot, the state of identicality following the merging is not in fact the final phase of the condition at the point. This state of identicality too merges again into another finer state known as Sayujita, that is close conformity. When that has been attained, then alone one then alone can the knowledge gained be deemed as complete. Now this closeness or Sayujita having been attained, we proceed on further for higher knowledge. I'll start. Fifth knot, there is a great difference between search and craving, the latter being more appropriate, that is, craving being more appropriate. Our craving brings us to the knot, which is decidedly superior to all previous ones. Now we have reached the point and begun traversing it through and experiencing things in a practical way. Now we have our firm stand on it, and our thought assumes a similar trend, which continues till at last we develop the state of merging in the state of wandering. This offers us opportunity to experience its condition, which is somewhat peculiar in nature. By now we acquire control over the element of air, but the air here is quite changed. There are no gusts in it. It is something very calm and soothing. At this point, an Abhyasi often develops two conditions. Sometimes a feeling of sadness is felt, and tears well up while he is passing from this state of knowledge to that of the real one. And sometimes the air here thrills him with experiences exciting laughter and weeping. In our system, an Abhyasi is not allowed to stay long at this state, but is taken onwards after having developed the state of identicality through the master's power. Thus, the time now comes for the Abhyasi to move ahead. The full knowledge of the Pind or the material sphere is now attained. There is a particular sound too at every knot. The higher the knot, the sweeter is the sound. It is loudest in the Pind, material sphere, but it grows softer and softer as we ascend higher. If one concentrates one's attention over these sounds or on the rhythmic rise and pitch, he develops only the siddhis or the miracle working capacity. The sound at all five notes, though slightly different, is much similar to each other. It is known as the wisdom of five fires, Panchagni Vidya, over which Ravana had acquired full control. But friends, my purpose is not to make one a demon, so I keep them unrevealed. Let anyone who likes to do so try for himself. The vibrations at the point are such as to make one feel the echo of the sound there. They grow loud and low with the change in the condition. So we'll close here today. If anybody has anything to add, can add.
No, Vivek, I think it's very deep subject. It requires a lot of
Contemplation. Yeah.
practice and contemplation to even understand these words.
Correct.
If,
Yeah. We'll take a pause then.
yeah.